Welcome to Critical Aspects of Law Enforcement, a podcast where we dive into the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being of the law enforcement officer.
Minor injury accident to the 2700 block of 156th Avenue Northeast.
All right, welcome back to Critical Aspects of Law Enforcement. I'm your host, Vernon Phillips, and today on the show, we got a special guest. We've got Matt Domyancic, so hopefully I got that right. Close enough. Matt, I appreciate you coming on the show. I'm going to turn it over to you, just kind of get an idea of who you are. So just your background, how long you were in law enforcement, how long you've been doing the chaplaincy thing, kind of some of your hobbies and things like that.
All right. Reader's Digest version. I was a cop in Connecticut and in Fairfax County, Virginia, which is the DC area. I worked patrol, peer support before it was even kind of a cool thing. Back then it was older women that worked admin jobs and showed up after an event and told you it's okay to cry and you want a hug. SWAT, full-time police academy instructor, where I implemented progressive breath work, more strength conditioning like a Division I athlete, more shooting, more fighting. Also an emphasis on lethal force psychology from Dave Grossman's content and the psychology and physiology of a violent encounter per Tony Blauer's SPEAR system. The whole time I was a cop, I was also a college strength conditioning coach, first at Yale and then at Georgetown University, where I also did campus ministry. So I was a cop, strength coach, doing campus ministry. Went through a gnarly medical retirement, ended up in LA. And yeah, that was a hard transition, but then continued to be a strength coach, a sports psychology consultant at a private facility for elite and NFL athletes. And then probably about a decade of doing police chaplain, peer support, kind of wellness stuff, and maybe in a different manner than stereotypical chaplains. My philosophy was be proactive, ride, lift, and shoot with the cops and deputies to proactively build relationships so they trust you, not wait until a critical incident, show up afterwards and say, hey, you want to pray or spill your guts to me? And it's like, I don't know who you are. So that's Reader's Digest version of my background.
Yeah, and there's a whole lot there that we could just kind of tackle and say, okay, let's just focus on this, let's focus on that. So obviously you have a pretty impressive background, and what you bring to the table, I'm sure helps a lot of individuals, not just in the first responder realm, with our law enforcement, but also, beyond that, just with the different things that you've done. So, man, I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the work that you're doing. But, obviously, even in ministry, law enforcement, all of that, right, that takes a toll on the individual. So what is it that you do to keep yourself just in the best, peak operating condition that you can? So that's physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So what is it you do kind of daily to kind of make sure all of that is in sync?
So since I was a young kid and into football, I eat very strict. I'm very rigid around working out almost every day and getting tons of steps in. Cold plunging when I have the opportunity, sauna, cryotherapy, sensory deprivation float tank. Obviously, I have like my devotional time. I read the liturgy, the scripture every day. I do psychoanalysis, which is a form of therapy that they look at the unconscious. I've been doing that for about 20 years. I've also been in something called spiritual direction. Not a ton of people are familiar, but it's very often clergy who also have a background in some kind of mental health. But it's spending time with them, seeing where God is showing up in your life and how your prayer life's going. So having mentors, elders, peers, therapy, paying attention to stress management, sleep, nutrition, exercise, and movement. I try to go on retreats to kind of recharge my battery as much as we're listening to other people's stories, or even being in ministry, being a coach, being a cop, especially anybody, ER doctors, nurses, veterans, firefighters, all that suffering of other people that you're immersed in and being exposed to trauma, it takes a toll on our physiology and it takes a toll on our psyche. And we know that from statistics. So I'm super high maintenance with self-care is not selfish. We can't give away that which we do not possess for ourselves. And if we don't heal what hurt us, we will bleed on people that did not cut us. So I take self-care very seriously.
Yeah, that's awesome. And there's a lot of things in there, obviously, that we can draw from. A couple of things that I like that you shared on is obviously, you're in scripture every day. You're making that a priority. So obviously, from my standpoint as well as being a chaplain, that's an important aspect for myself. Getting that in. But then you also hit on a couple other things that I do quite often myself is cold plunging and sauna. Um, so much to the point that now I've got at my house, we've got a sauna, we've got infrared sauna at the house, and we've got a cold plunge at the house because when I started getting into that a couple years ago, I just saw the benefits of it for myself and just how my body responded. So that's awesome to hear. And there's people that are like, "You do what?" I'm like, "Yeah, like they're like cold plunge, like how cold?" And I'm like, well, I mean, I can set mine. Mine's not like I can't set it down to like below 40, but I can get mine to about 42 degrees. Um, and last week, it's kind of funny. I was just telling somebody that earlier today. Last week was one of the coldest days that we've had down here in Florida, and it was 15 degrees at my house when I woke up. And I went out in the garage and jumped in the cold plunge, and I came in. A few minutes later, my wife is like, "Are you for real right now?" I'm like, "What?" She's like, "It's literally like 15 degrees outside." I'm like, "Yeah." So I'm a big fan of that. The sauna, the cold plunge, um, and then my wife and I we regularly work out together. We've got a gym set up in the garage, and that's something that we both kind of look forward to doing and being able to do together. Big fan of all that. So, and I appreciate you sharing that. I want you to say it again about the self care because I've never heard it before, and it was you said something along the lines of that we end up bleeding on people that didn't cut us. What was that
Yeah,
again?
I'll go through some quotes that I use in almost every presentation. First of all, self-care is not selfish. We can't give away that which we do not possess for ourselves. That's self-love, self-worth, self-confidence. If your battery's dry or your well goes empty, you can't give someone else a drink. And cops, alpha male, high warrior archetype are used to fix and take care of everyone else, burn the candle at both ends. Also, a famous spirituality author has a quote: pain that is not transformed is transmitted. Pain that is not transformed is transmitted. And even if you're like, hey, my life is good, you don't think all of that trauma that and the suffering of other people you're dealing with every day. If we looked at your aura ring, HRV, your brain waves, EEG, if you were doing blood labs on blood sugar, hormones, inflammation markers, your physiology is affected by the stress and trauma that you face. So you need to do something to self-regulate. Because
Oh, absolutely.
if you don't heal what hurt you, you will bleed on people that did not cut you. And who is that with cops and first responders? It's
Family.
usually the family. Yeah, we're bleeding on our
Usually your
family.
family. Yep.
Yeah. And then in the 90s at SIG Arms Academy, I first heard this from Dave Grossman. Are you familiar with Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman?
Yeah.
Good man. Pain that is shared is pain divided. And that ties into something called post-traumatic growth. We share our story to a peer. It doesn't always have to be clergy or a therapist. If somebody pays attention to your story and you feel understood, not judged, they're not trying to fix you, that can be very healing, not suck it up, drive on. So pain that is shared is pain divided. Joy that is shared is joy multiplied.
Yeah, that's awesome. So no, I appreciate that. Those are some good quotes that we probably should be reciting more often to ourselves, for sure. Um, and then you also just brought up something else that we could probably chase a rabbit on as well. But HRV.
Hmm.
When I started getting into uh, you know, the functional medicine and also holistic, like looking and dealing with yourself, not just from the traditional medical practice standpoint, but the holistic, like, hey, let's fix the whole person, right? Let's not just
Hmm.
fix one area. That's where I got introduced to the infrared sauna, the cold plunge, the um, brain tap, HRV, and the thing is with HRV is, man, you can go in there and you can say what you want, but the HRV is going to tell the truth of where you're at with your stress level. Last
And
time I went
sleep.
in and
And
sleep.
sleep.
Last time I went in, they said, they're like, "What is going on?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "This is like one of the worst ones you've had yet." Like, you know, I was just, kind of tapped out, and they're like, "No, you're like, you're moving the needle beyond tapped out. Like, what's going on?" So, it requires you to be honest with yourself and take a look and be like, "Okay, man, where do I need to kind of start moving this needle and make some adjustments because this isn't sustainable." Um, we always say that, hey, I'm really good. I can function in high stress events and I'm good to go and I can just keep bam, bam, bam. It's like, okay, you might be able to do that for a period of time, but that is not sustainable as an individual. Eventually your body is going to break down. And it's going to let you know that, hey, y- we're not good. When that comes out in all kinds of things. It comes out in disease and allergies and
Mhm.
ailments in your body. The more that you start to learn that, the more you start to understand yourself as a person and how you can offset that, and you could put things in place to help alter that. So it's kind of funny because a lot of things you're sharing, I'm like, yeah, except for maybe the eating strict part. I'll go through phases where I'll eat really strict and then I'll kind of not do so well. so uh, I still got to iron that part out, but
We're all a
so
work
yeah,
in progress for the rest of our lives. And I'm interested in the fact that you use brain tap. And I mean, that might be something to mention to people because I've used brain tap and other forms of neuromodulation, binaural beats. They're different forms of like
yep,
mindfulness or meditation. So I think that's a beautiful thing that you brought up. And also so people know there's a man of faith called his name is Rich Ganley, Positive Impact Alliance. People can Google the Recharge Room. He installs red light therapy, sauna, cold plunge, a meditation app, and vagus nerve stimulator at police and fire departments. And he's friends with Dr. Thomas Seeger, which, if you don't follow him,
okay,
one of the world's experts on cold plunge and contrast, like sauna, cold plunge, and how much it helps mitochondria and mental health, as well as our hormones and possibly PTSD and things like TBI. So there's science behind the cold plunge, the sauna, the red light therapy, as well as meditation and forms of silence and journaling. And if you're wearing the HRV ring, and I challenge guys, pay attention to your sleep. When I hug my woman or snuggle with her, may think I'm taking a nap. When I'm doing contemplative prayer, it thinks I'm taking a nap. So you can see the things in your life, people, places, things, activities, food or drink that are draining your battery or recharging your battery.
yeah. Yeah, so the brain tap, I got introduced to that, like I said, when I started going to, it's called Faithfully Guided. They're a holistic medical practice. And when I first did it, I couldn't do it. Right? Uh, I could not allow myself to sit in the chair and put the visor over and relax, and so. But after that, after I kind of got out of my own head, right? Um, I I used it often. So we actually bought one for the agency that I serve. So I
Wow.
have one, and I have people that'll come and they'll sit and they'll do a session. And I've had several of the command staff do it. I've had all the way up to the sheriff. They've all tried it, and some of them, they're leaving. They're like, that is absolutely incredible. They're like, it literally makes me like all the things that I need to think about, it like it it wipes it out, and I just have to sit in the moment, right? And
Hmm.
I'm like, yeah, because it's stimulating your brain, to that rest and relaxation, depending on which track you pick. I mean, whether it's in the morning and you're stimulating your brain to to wake up and to be intuitive and to be creative and to kind of energize yourself, or it's the afternoon where a lot of people have spent so much of their day just you know running and running and running in their mind, and it gives them that opportunity to kind of just hit the pause and say, okay, let me just rest, relax, recharge, and then allow me to reconnect in a way that, brings me down, kind of returns me to my normal base level, and just helps me operate better. So I just, before coming to doing this with you, I had somebody, come in and sit down and do a session. So, um, yep. So it's, I'm trying, man. I'm trying to plug stuff in as much as I can. And
It sounds like you're super progressive, Vern. Like that's brain tap's a big deal. And maybe I'll tell you offline if you don't remember. There's another thing called touch points, and you can put them on your wrists, and it's bilateral stimulation, which is similar to what EMDR does. So they're another little gadget that you can try to sit for 10 or 20 minutes. But yeah, you're doing good things, man.
we're trying. We're trying. Just trying to invest back into our people. Trying to get them to see the importance of it's okay to invest in yourself. It's okay to say, hey, I'm kind of tapped out. I'm hitting. I'm getting pegged out. What can I do? So, we're gonna keep kind of pushing forward on some of this stuff and doing what we can do. But for myself, this is stuff that I've been doing the last couple of years, and it's significantly helped me. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm, straight as an arrow, even keel all the time, because that's not realistic, right? Um, and
Nobody
there's even
is.
time, yeah, and there's even times where now that my wife, she knows all the stuff that I have gotten into and do, she'll even be like, "Hey, have you done any of your, you know, stress management techniques today?" And I'm like, "No, just leave me alone. Let me be, let me be in my poor attitude." And she'll call me out and be like, "Hey, why don't you go sit in the sauna? Why don't you go do some, some breathing exercises? Take a minute, because you're being a jerk, right? For a lack of better words."
Mhm.
But I think that as we move forward in law enforcement, I think, and just the first responder community, we need to start incorporating some of these things and allowing them to see like, hey, not, this isn't like woo woo stuff, right? We're not in here trying to, spin things around and, do all this fancy stuff and hypnotize you. Like, you know, there is some of that. So you have to be very discern what's good and what's applicable. For the most part, the things that we're talking about, it's not the woo-woo stuff, right? We're not trying to be all weird and mystic and crazy and all that kind of thing. But yeah, it's like I said, we could probably chase all these little
I could.
rabbit holes. No, but for you, as you kind of look at law enforcement, what are some of the biggest roadblocks that you see right now?
I think a lot of things haven't changed in 25 years. And when we say mental health, wellness, which chaplaincy is kind of lumped in there, if you even got them, it's very much reactionary only, check in on people after a critical incident, and maybe from resources if it's a volunteer chaplain you never see, if you don't have a psychologist that gets paid to come ride along, be in briefing and roll call, and maybe depending on who your peer support people are, if they're not trusted, it's like, okay, signs and symptoms of PTSD, addiction, and suicide. So mental health and wellness is like, wait until you have a mouthful of cavities before you go to the dentist where they got to yank all your teeth out versus how do you brush and floss with all the adversity, all the candy and the junk food that we got to eat as a cop or a first responder. And a couple times a year, whether it's a therapist or peer support or a clergy you trust, are you checking in with someone else that can be more objective than you? Because we all play mental gymnastics to avoid looking at the skeletons in the closet and the demons in the mirror. So I think we need to be left of bang versus right of bang. And a lot of the mental health conversations online with the influencers and at conferences, it almost always has to be the cop that got a DUI, cheated on their third wife, didn't get themselves prepared for a use of force. So they quit the job because it was too stressful or had to medically retire. And they went on a retreat or rehab or did 5 EMDR sessions. And now they're cured and they want to be the guru, the shaman, getting the helpers high. But the main message in mental health and wellness is it's okay not to be okay and get help when you're rock bottom. And I'd like to view this more like a fitness level, whether it's a spiritual fitness level, it's a physical fitness level. If you want to have a big bench and abs, you're going to have to manage stress, pay attention to sleep, work out appropriately, eat a certain way. And then when you get the bench or the abs you want, you can't just quit working out. But
Yeah.
it's more, can we view this more like sports preparation? You do strength and conditioning year round. As soon as you feel an injury coming on, you go to sports medicine, the PT or the doctor. There's no shame in it, and you stay on top of things. But the way we treat it too much is, at least from I hear guys like, "Hey man, I don't want to go on a retreat. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to burden the resources for all the broken people." Because we just talk about signs and symptoms of PTSD, addiction, and suicide. So I think we just continue to stigmatize things to right of bang after a crisis, which sometimes it takes people that to have emotional sobriety to say they want to change. But I think we should be bringing awareness how to brush and floss with trauma, adversity, throughout a career.
Yeah. I mean, if you can get in there and, remove that fuse, why would we not do that? Right. Um, so, and it's hard to do that, especially, making sure you've got the right people in place. You've got enough people in place that, you're going around and you're getting those touch points, you're getting those contacts where, like you said, it's not just after a critical incident or traumatic event. It's before that. It's just touching base, like, you know, creating that and establishing that rapport and that relationship. You know, we look at kind of where we're at right now in law enforcement, and obviously there's always been a physical, right? You're always focused on the physical. It's picked up on the mental and the emotional, but I kind of look at for the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, and I kind of feel like the spiritual is kind of starting to take a back seat, right? I feel like there's been so much focus on mental health and wellness and the emotional aspect of keeping them, well, that we're kind of losing that spiritual component. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it could be different where you're from because you're saying losing it. So I was a cop in Connecticut, the DC area, and a police chaplain in Los Angeles. And there really was no emphasis on the spiritual, so it's not like I don't see it as we're losing it. I don't know. I've never seen it in the places that I've been law enforcement. And even when it comes up, say, as a chaplain in speaking in a new agency or starting to ride along in a new agency, people often think it too is stigmatized with whatever the worst experience is they've had with a hypocritical religious person. So even if somebody is a person of faith, they're like, whoa, 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 I don't want them talking to me about anything spiritual because it could be woo woo, right? Is this going to be some woo woo stuff? Or what's the agenda? Are there strings attached? Or does this person really love me and is not going to judge me wherever I am and can let me be authentic and share my story and my pain? And can they, I mean, ultimately, I would hope that spiritually, what we're doing is trying to teach people how to love themselves more, forgive themselves, and find meaning and purpose, even in the horrible things that have happened to us or that we've witnessed on the streets as a cop. And it is a component of post traumatic growth, like spirituality and having a faith life is a part of research that says you're going to have better resiliency.
Yeah,
And you might
absolutely.
be, so I don't know if that answered your question, but I don't know where I haven't been anywhere where it's totally emphasized. And the reason I was shocked when I met you on LinkedIn is everywhere I've been, even in some of the largest agencies in the country, chaplains are volunteer only. And to be honest, a lot of them are completely ineffective. They're never around. And when they are, they bring donuts to talk to command staff or a supervisor. So the patrol, NARC gang, SWAT, detective guys that really need them are like, I'm not going to share anything with that person that thinks it's cool to hang around with the brass. So I've never seen an emphasis on the spiritual in any agency I've been in.
Yeah, and I guess I maybe should have worded it a little bit different, but I don't want to say lose, but maybe just not as heavily, gauged or emphasized, if that makes sense. Um, so I mean, yeah, fortunately for myself, I'm in an agency where, yeah, I mean, I'm full time. I'm always, you know, trying to invest into our people, and that's a great benefit for me, right? To be there, to be hands on. Uh, you know, like, people that know me there, like I've worked with them, right? Slung trays in the jail with them, or we worked side by side together. So I've already established that rapport. But you did bring up a good point when you talk about chaplains, and I don't want to beat up chaplains too much, right? Um, but there's just this, historically or statistically, they're the old overweight white guys that come and they hang around for a little bit, or they can't relate, or they try to relate and they push too much, and it turns people off, and people are like, what are we doing here, right? um so trying to find people who either have military background, or who are some type of you high stress profession background. I mean, we've got a volunteer chaplain that was a ER trauma nurse before he became a pastor, and he was also in the military. So, he understands, right? He knows his way around, just critical incidents, like just chaos going on, and so he can plug in and he fits really well. Um, but the other thing is finding those individuals who are able and willing to step in and fill that role, and also be culturally relevant. Um, a- and it's hard to find people to fill that. It just is.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about important things that I've heard over and over again. They want shared experience. It doesn't have to be police, fire, military, it could be ER, but has somebody been in the dirt, punched in the face, had to grind through something? So is trauma informed not through books and study, but through life experience, and also culturally competent. And so if they don't come from a high warrior archetype background themselves, you can build cultural competency, but it's like ride along a lot,
Yeah.
participate or observe in training, be in the trenches like a military chaplain goes through boot camp, lives on base, deploys with the troops. When I started, and I'm wearing a shirt from South LA, LA Sheriff's Department, that was the station, South LA. I used to ride every Friday, Saturday graveyard shift, two-man cars, so I had to ride behind the cage on the plastic seat. The first 6 months, they thought I was an undercover federal agent, because they were like, wait, you don't get paid. You're riding the midnight shift. Like nobody cares about us. No chaplain, no psychologist. They ride for an hour in the front seat, day shift, somewhere where it's not dangerous. So they're suspicious as heck, because they think nobody, and a lot of agencies across the country, because there's not chaplains and fully staffed psychologists that they feel are trauma informed through experience and culturally competent. They're suspicious when somebody might show up and has some kind of background. But that's sad. We need more former first responders, veterans, ER doctors and nurses, perhaps, whether it's volunteer or paid, that are willing to put hours in building relationships with the line workers, not the supervisors.
Yeah, and you probably get this question a lot too, but I'll get people that'll ask me, they're like, "Hey, so how did you get the buy-in? Like, what did you do to get them to trust you?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm a little bit different because I've I've been here, right? And I've worked with them, and I've been at this agency since I started. So people that are on the road, people are in the jail, like, you know, I know them. It wasn't,
Mhm.
I didn't come in. I didn't come in from the outside. So I can't answer that question. What I can say is, it's going to take time. Like, you're not just going to come in and expect them to just automatically open up and tell you everything, that you're hoping that they do. When you come in, it's like, hey, I just want them, and I hear it. Hey, I just want them to trust me, to be able to come to me and call me when they need it. And it's like, that'll come, but it's not going to come when you show up and we're walking around and I'm introducing you to people, and you say, well, hey, so what's one of the worst things you've experienced? It's like, you don't know this person. right? You can't lead with that. Like, and I'm just kind of like, what are we doing, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then like, like we talked about, beforehand, like on this show, I will ask individuals that, that are on here. I'm like, hey, what's one of the worst calls you've gone through? How did you get on the other side of that? Right. Um, but that's in the context of we're having this conversation so that other people can understand, like, hey, man, they went through that. I went through something similar and they got on the other side of it. So maybe I can get on the other side of it too. Maybe I can, put in the work and do what I need to and and re- and start my recovery process. So, it's not just like you're going to start walking around and asking that.
Uh-huh.
That's almost like you're just wanting to hear the horror stories, right? So that you can get some type of buy-in, and that's not how it works, right?
No, I will tell you, even as a former cop, that in South Central Los Angeles and in Torrance PD, I rode usually 2 days a week and lifted weights 2 to 3 days a week at each station, would go to firearms training, evoc. I mean, I put in hours. You might be looking at an investment of 1 to 2 years before somebody trusts you with their marriage problems, the doubts they have around their faith life, the calls that haunt them that they've never shared with anyone, that they're having nightmares and they're drinking too much to get themselves to go to sleep. You could be talking couple years process, depending on the person. Then there might be other people that they trust you enough. And when immediately, it wouldn't be the first time you're at the station and introduced and then ask the question like that's going to shut them down. And they're going to tell all their
Yeah,
buddies, this guy doesn't know what the guy or girl doesn't know what the heck they're talking about, and, avoid them. But it's a very I mean, cops are the most suspicious people there are because they see so much bad stuff and people lie to them all the time. And cops have the best BS detector in the world.
yeah,
So you got to be authentic. And if you show people you care, eventually you need to let them share the stories with you when they're ready and when they sort of ask. If you come in asking to share the worst call ever, or, hey, can I pray for you after my buddy just got killed? I mean, it is kind of offensive to a lot of cops, even the cops that are people of faith. It's like, you don't know me. You didn't know my friend. Like, yeah, this is kind of sacred ground, the life and death we deal with. And if you can't come around on a more regular basis to understand what we go through, I'm not going to share my grieving process with you at this point.
yeah. And there's some that do that, like, they invest. I've got a friend who's a chaplain out in Texas. He's full-time. He's not sworn, but, he came in from the outside. He's been full-time for, I wanna say, the last, 7 years, 7, 8 years, maybe, somewhere around there. Um, and but he's put that time in, and he's put the effort in, and so, he's got that buy-in. He's established that rapport. Going out and riding, as much as he can to, people coming in his office, stopping in his office, and he always jokes. He's like, "Yeah," he's like, "You know what?" He's like, I stop at the gym every day," and he's like, "Well, hold on now." He's like, "Not to work out." He's like, "Just to fill up my water bottle," and but and he says, yeah, he'll stop there and they'll be like, "Hey, Chap, when you gonna get in here and get some sets with us?" And well, I'll do it. And um, as soon as you come up and sit in the office, I'm like, "Oh, okay, we." And he's established that rapport now, right? Where you know he's got that buy-in because he's invested the time. Now, granted, it's a he's full time, so that makes it a little bit easier. But there's a lot of other people that I know that I got another friend and he's sworn, he's volunteer, but he is he's older, but he is in awesome shape. I mean, the guy is an absolute beast. I met him a couple years ago on a trip out of country, and him and I just hit it off really well, just because we think the same, we see things the same. We're down in the gym early in the morning together, and I mean, he you know, just put together, squared away, in good shape. Um, I mean, so we're over there. It's a whole group of chaplains, and we went to Israel together, and we went and saw Masada, and there was somebody's like, hey, well, I was here one time, and I made it down this mountain with these 6-year-olds, and it was we did it in like 15 minutes or something like that, and we're like, there ain't no way. We're like, all right, we're gonna do it. So afterwards, him and I, we hooked it down Masada. So from the top all the way down. I mean, we were in a pretty good tick, and I think we got down and we did it in like 13 and a half minutes, something like that. And we're like, there's just no way. This guy's full of it. And he come down, he's like, wow. He's like, I was just messing with you. I was just see if you guys would do it. How many other chaplains do you think that you could get and say, hey, it's 90 degrees out. Let's run down Masada. They're just not going to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are individuals, right, that kind of fit fit the need, fit the mold really well, and then there's some that and I think you and I talked a little bit about that when we were kind of going back and forth, just like, man, where's the need, and then how do we address that need, right? So if you were going to mentor somebody wanting to become a chaplain, what are some of the things that you encourage them to do, or the kind of the do's and don'ts?
Well, if they're not former law enforcement, if you can go through a citizens academy, that's a start. And I would say ride along at least once a week if you have the time. But depending on if it's volunteer or not, but I think you should ride on every shift and try to ride the whole shift. Don't you just partial ride alongs. Whether they'll let you or not, at least attend and observe firearms, evoc, defensive tactics, arrest and control. Every state calls it different things. But be busy in the trenches trying to understand them from their perspective. Don'ts. Do not evangelize, proselytize, try to recruit people to your church. Do not push. And here's something that's important, even as like a Christian, there's over 45,000 different Christian denominations. And within each one of those denominations, there's conservative and liberal and all these things in between. And when the job of a pastor is not to convert or pressure somebody to belong to your church or have your same theology, dogma, or doctrine. It's really sharing the love of God with them. So it's about giving people a sacred space to be who they are and not be judged. And that's really hard to do for a lot of people, because it's a different type of ministry. It's not Bible thumping. It's not trying to convert. It's not trying to baptize. It's not trying to get people to recommit their life to Christ. And the cops are suspicious of that. They're just so suspicious. So listen more than you talk, and wait until somebody starts sharing whatever it may be that it could be a burden to them without you needing to ask. Because trust me, if you put in the time, they will share if and when they're ready. And if you speak too soon, or you try to proselytize or evangelize, you make it hard for every other chaplain that comes after you with that person in that agency, or every other quote like religious person or person of faith, because there are people that have church hurt and have been traumatized by bad theology and hypocritical or even well-intentioned people of faith. And so we need to do more just loving on people where they experience that unconditional love and the grace and the forgiveness and the lack of judgment, rather than try to put words to all that type of stuff.
Yeah, no, and those are all great points. We're going through trying to bring on a couple of new volunteer chaplains as well, and just sitting down talking with them like, hey, this is what we look for, this is what we expect, and like you said, it's tough finding individuals that have that time, right? Because pastors are notorious for doing what? For saying yes to too many things, right?
Yeah.
And getting involved, and getting involved over here and in this ministry and this ministry and this ministry and this ministry, and So then the next thing you know, like you're pulled in so many different directions that even if you can come and ride along, for a shift or half a shift, that you're so preoccupied with all these other things that you should be doing or could be doing right at that time that you're missing that opportunity to connect. Even if you
Hmm.
go and you sit there and nobody talks for 6 hours, you're there, right? And you're showing them that, hey, you're comfortable in the uncomfortable. But most pastors can't go and sit for 6 hours and not say a dang thing.
Because I mean, I'm not going to say it's a bad thing, but a lot of, whether it's Bible college, seminary training, they are taught, their job is whatever their narrow slice of religion or denomination is. Man, even my salvation might be at risk if I don't convince other people to join my church, my tribe. And they're taught to teach, preach, and defend. A chaplain's job is a ministry of presence, a hospital chaplain. Like, if somebody wanted real training, go get a clinical pastoral education at a hospital. They're going to teach you to hold space for all kinds of people, and you're meeting them where they are, whether they're Muslim, Jew, agnostic, atheist, spiritual but not religious, or they're Baptist and you're Methodist, right? Like, you let them be where they are and you share love with them. Yeah, that's really hard to find with a lot of clergy because they've been trained to do a lot of talking. But real chaplaincy and something called spiritual direction, and spiritual direction schools are usually 2 to 3 years long. It's learning how to listen to someone and be a ministry of presence and hang out with the line, the deputies that are working the jail or working patrol, specialized units. For whatever reason, they think it's sexy a lot of times to hang out with brass. That's another big mistake I see. So,
Yeah, I want to point out that it's not that they don't need it also, right? It's not the fact that the brass doesn't need somebody to go and meet with them, right, and invest into them, but you have to view it from the standpoint of somebody on the line level where, if they don't know you and you haven't got that buy-in yet, right? Or you haven't created that rapport that, if you're sitting there and then you come and you ride in the car with them, what's the first thing they're going to think?
I'm not saying
Hey,
anything because you're going to tell
I'm
the
not saying,
captain, lieutenant.
yeah, I'm not saying anything because, the first person you go and see is whoever this supervisor is or whatever. So, but once you establish, like, then you can go and you can invest and you can go and you can sit with, all the individuals at whatever that agency or department is, right? Because then you've established that credibility where people understand that you're there for everybody,
Hmm.
right? But you're also not going to violate or our confidentiality, or if I tell you something, I know that you're not going to go back and say, you know, this to somebody else. Um, what people don't realize it or not is that, you know, chaplains are a lot of times the secret keeper, right?
Hmm. If
And
you have the trust, yeah.
if you have if you have the trust, right? The secret keeper, and it goes back to the whole self care thing. That if you're a chaplain and you're at that point now, where that's kind of like, you're that person, right? Where pretty much anybody will come and they'll talk to you and they'll share. Eventually, it gets heavy. So you have to be investing in yourself. You have to
Hmm.
be taking care of yourself. Um, and another thing that I've seen is there's a lot of chaplains that are, they're teaching classes on stress or resilience or self care. And it's like, I don't mean anything by this. And I am not the best example always myself. But if you're going to get in front of a bunch of cops and tell them how they need to take care of themselves, right? You better at least somewhat look the part.
Amen. That's mental health professionals and chaplains are teaching all this
Yes.
wellness stuff. And they look, a lot of them, this is the fact, because this is what the guys and girls tell me. I don't want a frumpy, overweight, middle aged female therapist or the old out of shape white guy that can't even get in and out of the cruiser, right? Practice what you preach. You got to role model that. We influence people by how we're living our life, not by what we're putting up on a PowerPoint, and definitely not the mental health professionals and chaplains that take a picture doing selfies with the sheriff or the chief, and that's what they blast all over their social media. You don't walk the talk, and you're showing that you don't understand the culture. So, yeah, man, that's mental health and wellness in general, not just chaplains. Like, you got to look the part, or these guys and gals aren't going to trust you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you get up there and you're like, hey, look, you gotta invest in yourself. You gotta take care of yourself. You gotta be making sure you're taking care of the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And you're up there looking like a soup sandwich. It's gonna hit flat, and it's not gonna be received well. And I don't mean this in any type of negative way, because like I said, you know, you you're a prime example, right, of being put together and being in shape. Uh, I do the best I can, right? I mean, I could be doing better. I'll put some weight on, I'll lose some weight. I'll put some weight back on, I'll lose some weight. Right? Most of the part, you know, 80% of the time, I'm trying to invest in myself to keep myself, you know, better than what I was before. And we all kind of go through the seasons where you kind of just get in a rut, you get out of the routine, you kind of get in that funk, but you don't stay there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you also are honest about that.
Yeah.
So a couple years ago, I talked on emotional intelligence, and I said, "Look, I'll be the first one to tell you. There's been some times at my house where I have not managed my emotions the best that I needed, and and then I have to go back, my son or my daughter, and be like, hey, look, you know, yes, whatever it was that you did, shouldn't have done, but my reaction to that, and that needed to be." Because you got everything else going on, and that was just kind of that thing that tipped you over the edge. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that we're not going to address whatever the issue was, but if I'm being accountable to myself and if I'm being authentic, I need to go and be like, hey, look, I was in the wrong. I shouldn't have raised my voice. I shouldn't have said X, Y, Z. So if you're gonna get up there, then at least be honest and be like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
you know what? Go through this. Obviously, right now, I'm probably not the best candidate for it, but do something, I'm getting better. So, but yeah, like I said, I'm not trying to beat people up, but
Now, I mean, nobody's perfect. We're all a work in progress. Can we be better today than whatever we were yesterday? And we shouldn't be competing with anyone else. And the more we experience, if we're having a healthy emotional and spiritual journey, I think, whether it's success or suffering, we're more humble and grateful for the good things in our lives. And we just keep trying to put one foot in front of the other. And it's going to be for the rest of our lives. None of us ever quote arrive in every area of our life, you know.
yep,
Yep.
it's a process
It's a
of
process of
sanctification.
sanctification.
Like
Like,
it,
it,
it's never gonna end, right?
hmm
You're like, it's always you have to continue to invest in yourself and grow. Whether that's physical, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, like you have to continue to invest. So I want to be respectful of your time, Matt, but as you kind of look at where you're at now, how much has God, played where you're at today? Just, your faith and your relationship with Him.
Wow, I wouldn't know how to summarize. I mean, like I grew up, we had to go to church. My mom said
Yeah.
prayers every night before bed. My dad's a very prayerful man. He's almost 81, but he sits in his chair 1 to 2 hours a day and prays in silence. So I had good role models when I was young. I never left the church. And through longer stories some other day, in college football, I had a really severe injury that they thought I would never play again. And if I can't run and play football, I can't do law enforcement or go back in the military. And I had a little bit of a awakening, I should say a big awakening, where I was like, there's more to faith life than saying my prayers to be good at football, to get a good grade on a test, and maybe back then get me through this hangover. I'll never drink this much again. I haven't drank in 30 years, not because I have or had a problem. Anyways, I had, it's somewhat of, I think, immature faith. I'm following these purity codes and rules of
Mm.
morality to get to heaven on the day I physically die, far down the road. And through that football injury, I realized I prioritized football over God, so to speak. And I was like, how do I really give my life to God? And that was about 30 years ago. I'm 51. God and my faith has been the anchor of my life in so many ways. And I actually became a cop as a form of ministry. I thought I wanted to be a Fed. I went to Air Force Academy and Colgate undergrad. Those are kind of prestigious academic. I had a master's in forensic science under Dr. Henry Lee, the world's most renowned forensic scientist. And I thought I wanted to be a Fed. And then longer stories, did an internship training with special operations on a mountain in West Virginia with Rod Ryan, former Green Beret, DC SWAT, who's a man of faith and took me under his wing. And through a discernment process, I was like, what better place to do ministry than law enforcement? The victims are having sometimes the worst day of their life. A lot of the criminals, obviously not a good day. And thanks to the grace of God, I wasn't raised in these situations where maybe I could have turned out to be a criminal. So we get an opportunity to really love on people in their darkest hour. And that's what I saw police work as an opportunity to grow in my faith. And I loved it. So yeah, God's the anchor of my life. I'm not perfect. And I'm trying to work out my salvation every day, brother, and just trying to be a better version of myself every day and to serve other people the best I can based on all the love that I can see that I've received from God.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And if somebody wants to reach out to you or get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
My website is tacticalchaplain.com. So tacticalchaplain.com. And on Instagram, there's The Tactical Chaplain and Thin Blue Line Spirituality. Thin Blue Line Spirituality. And I'm on LinkedIn. That's how we met. So reach out on LinkedIn, Instagram, or through the website. Happy to talk to anybody in law enforcement, first responders that want some support.
Yep. And I'll add all that in the show notes. So Matt, I appreciate it. It's been a great conversation, and we could probably continue and just go on. And I'm sure that we'll have a couple of more episodes here in the future. So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Fern. A privilege.
Yep, absolutely.
I appreciate you tuning in and listening to Critical Aspects of Law Enforcement. Remember to subscribe to the podcast and share this resource with your fellow officers. The goal of Critical Aspects is to serve, support, and sustain the law enforcement professionals. So head over to www.criticalaspects.org for more resources and information. And as always, God bless and be safe.